I'm going to try to do a short video today. I tried to film this earlier, and what happened is my battery ran down, so I had to charge it up. But anyway, lots of stuff going on in Trump world, and it seems like all of his lawyers have quit with less than 2 weeks left before the impeachment trial, which is supposed to be on the 8th of February. And I hope that the Democrats don't give him any more time to put up a defense. I mean, these lawyers were evidently, they didn't agree with the course to take or what kind of defense to have, because Trump still is trying to peddle this crap that, like a little kid thinking that he had his toys taken away from him. That bad boy Biden stole his toys of the presidency away from him. And so he lost all these attorneys, and there were Butch Bowers, Deborah Barbier, I guess that's how it's pronounced, Josh Howard, Johnny Gasser, and Greg Harris. So none of those lawyers are working for Donald Trump anymore. So it appears that nobody's admitting they're working on Trump's impeachment defense. So he may end up representing himself, and you've heard the old saying about people representing themselves have a fool for a client. And there's no bigger fool than Donald Trump. And then John Dean was talking about this talking about it. They refused to mount a bogus defense based on their client's wish to claim he was subjected to massive voter fraud and stuff. So we'll see. Stay tuned if he can find a lawyer that will take his ridiculous case in front of the U.S. Senate. Of course, the Republicans are, almost all of them are chicken shit to do anything because they're afraid of incurring the wrath of the dwindling number of Trump supporters. And it looks like Biden is off to a pretty good start as president. The polls show that has a very high approval rating. He's done a couple of screw-ups, as I've noted in previous videos, but overall he's hit the ground running, thank God. He doesn't need anybody to hold his hand how to do the job. And then I came across this, and this is a good article, and I'll put this in the link, like I'll put the impeachment defense article. But there is a lot of competition for the worst president in history. And for many years, this guy, Tim Naftali, or Naftali, he's a historian, and he talks about all the different baddies in American history, bad presidents. And for many years, Warren Harding was right on the bottom. And Warren Harding, of course, died in office. He was not poisoned by his wife. He actually was a very sick man and had died. And he was mired in scandal with the Teapot Dome scandal. And he wasn't really involved in that. He wasn't personally all that corrupt. Other than cheating on his wife, he wasn't really personally all that corrupt. But he surrounded himself with really bad people. It was just like Ulysses Grant did too. He was considered a really bad president. Great general, war hero and all that. But he stunk as a president because he surrounded himself with really, really bad people. And so then it went from Harding, and then, of course, historians decided that Harding really wasn't the worst. For years, it was Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan, and it was that they abetted and like he says, amplified the forces that drove the Union apart. So they sympathized, even though they were Northerners, they sympathized with the Southern slaveholders, and that just was bad shit. They should have, of course it's, 160 years past time, but they should have known better. And he goes into what happened, in case you need recall of what Pierce and Buchanan did, and they just fucked up. So Lincoln was, you know, the greatest president because he held the country together and he got rid of slavery. And speaking of slavery, shut up! Sorry about that. I mean, that dog, she always barks at everything. And anyhow, so there was that. And then Andrew Johnson was another flop, as he talks about, because he was a big sympathizer. You know, he was like not much different than Buchanan and Pierce. And he was just awful. But, so there was Johnson. And then, of course, we had George W. Bush. But George W. Bush he's kind of small potatoes when you think of the really bad actors that have been president. But probably, really, you can argue the very worst was Richard Nixon. And the reason he was the very worst, well, he was a criminal president. And this guy notes that Nixon got in there through subterfuge. He got in there because he was so pissed off at LBJ for drumming up the Paris peace talks. He thought he was doing that to help Hubert Humphrey, despite evidence that we know to the contrary that LBJ figured Nixon was going to get elected. But LBJ had the goods on Nixon and knew that Nixon, through third parties, torpedoed the Paris peace talks in 1968. And he dragged that damn war out. And that was the dirty thing about Nixon. And the Chennault affair and Watergate are inextricably tied together because of Vietnam. So he stretched that war out to ensure his election, and then he stretched it out 4 more years to ensure his re-election. All the while trying to cover it up. So Nixon was really a bad thing. And what was really bad is all those people died in Vietnam, including American troops. They all died for nothing. LBJ was actually trying to end the war. And Nixon prolonged it for his own political ambitions. So he was really, to do that was absolutely evil. So I still think that Nixon may be the very rock bottom. But you can make a huge case for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is the only president in American history who did not have any experience whatsoever in elected office or as a high-ranking military. He had neither. He was literally pulled off the street and was a celebrity. And we've always heard, oh, this celebrity ought to run for president, blah, 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 despite not knowing what the hell you're doing. Unlike, say, like somebody like Joe Biden, who had decades of experience and knew what the hell to do as soon as he got in there. Trump didn't have a clue what he was trying to do, and he wasn't even really a serious candidate anyway, as I've mentioned before. He just did this as a marketing scheme. But thanks to the media, they helped build him up into something he wasn't. And yes, he had a cult, but it wasn't near the monstrous levels that it would become eventually. So, anyway, this guy gives 3 reasons why he thinks Trump is the absolute worst. And he says he put his political prospects ahead of any sense of duty. And of course, this has to do with Russia. So he had foreign interference in the election. So that was one reason why he's the worst. And then his incompetence in handling not just immigration, but of course COVID-19. Nixon was totally cynical about Vietnam. He was totally cynical, where Trump was just a brazen incompetent. Just totally had no business. And I think bullheaded as anything. He wouldn't listen to any reason about COVID. So he just let the damn thing run rampant in the United States. So that's the second thing that he was bad. And of course, what you could argue with him being the very worst is, of course, what he's being impeached over now, going to trial over now, and that is inciting an insurrection, sedition, treason against the United States. Because of the because of the election, and so this made him absolutely and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but this made him the absolute worst president in history, because he did incite a riot against the United States, and that was beyond the pale of any president. I mean, Nixon never stooped to that level, and he was a little more, that's because he was smarter. Nixon had mental problems of a different sort, and he had hatred for his enemies, and he did anything and everything to subvert it. But what he did is he would try to use third parties to do his dirty work for him, as in the Chenault affair, as in Watergate, where Trump just decided to do it himself and just incite these riots. So you could say that Trump, you could argue Trump is the worst president, but you could make a big case for Nixon. And I think it may be close to a photo finish. But Nixon never did try to absolutely call for the overthrow of the United States. So Trump, and that's probably the way historians in the future will say, Trump is the worst because of this. The other things, the other aspects of his presidency, they were bad, but there were other presidents that did the same thing or even worse. But no president ever pulled the crap he did on January 6th.